moon cast long shadows over the quiet village of Willow Creek. In the thick of night, the soft rustling of leaves hinted at secrets waiting to unfold. A figure cloaked in darkness slipped through the narrow, winding paths, each step heavy with purpose. This was no ordinary night. It was the night Charlotte, the banker's daughter, chose to flee. Her heart thudded like a drum in her chest as she crept away from the imposing mansion that had sheltered her for so long. Despite its grandeur, the place felt suffocating, suffused with the weight of expectations and obligations. The cold air embraced her, igniting a fire of resolve. She was determined to escape the gilded cage her life had become. The reality that she was running toward an uncertain future fueled her courage. But Charlotte wasn't merely fleeing from the confines of wealth or privilege. No, she was escaping the oppressive grip of her father, a man who believed his daughter was just another investment, a vessel for his ambition. The past few weeks had solidified that belief. Cries of dismay had echoed through the mansion as he insisted that Charlotte marry someone of his choosing, someone who could serve his banking empire. In her gut, she felt a rising storm of fear and defiance. She was nobody's pawn. She had dreams of her own wild dreams that twisted and turned like the shadows dancing around her. There was a world beyond the polished silverware and empty parties, a world of adventure begging for her to explore it. As she reached the edge of the woods, the cool breeze rustled the leaves like soft whispers urging her on. It was here, at the threshold of the unknown, that she hesitated. The thrill of freedom collided with the fear that pulled her back toward the life she knew. But then came a flicker of movement out of the corner of her eye, a figure moving weightlessly within the trees. A voice, familiar yet foreign, called softly. It was Samuel, the farmhand from the outskirts of town. His weathered hands and calloused skin told stories of labor, of sweat and determination, and his gentle blue eyes held an understanding that transcended their different worlds. He asked, concern etched on his face. "I have to leave." Her answer was sharp but heavy with uncertainty. "I can't stay." Samuel's brow furrowed as he moved closer, the moonlight casting a glow on his features. "I've never been more serious," she confessed, desperation lacing her voice. He nodded slowly, understanding cascading over him. In that moment, the choice was crystal clear. She would follow Samuel into the unknown. Together, they began a journey that would change the trajectories of their lives forever. The air around them seemed charged, alive with possibilities. They moved swiftly through the woods, the trees standing sentinel as they passed, shielding their secret. The world behind them faded, the sounds of the village replaced by the symphony of night, a chorus of crickets and rustling branches. Charlotte's heart raced not just from fear, but exhilaration, a sweet taste of freedom that was new and intoxicating. As they arrived at Samuel's modest farmhouse, a humble structure made of weathered wood and stone, the place felt like a refuge. It was a stark contrast to the opulence she had known. The smell of hay and earth was grounding and real. It enveloped her like a warm embrace. "Welcome," Samuel said softly as he opened the door. The interior was simple, but it carried a beauty of its own, pictures of farm life on the walls, warm colors that felt inviting. But Charlotte wasn't just a guest in Samuel's home. She felt a sense of belonging that had long evaded her. Amid the quiet of the farmhouse, her spirit started to breathe. Yet the ghosts of her past lingered. Her father would stop at nothing to find her. Her disappearance would send shockwaves through the village. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Charlotte learned more about the rhythm of farm life, sharing laughter, stories, and dreams with Samuel. She washed the dishes while he prepared food, simple meals that filled their stomachs and souls. They spent hours under the starlit sky, talking about their hopes for the future. Charlotte asked one evening as they sat on the porch, their feet dangling above the grass. Samuel chuckled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I have everything I need right here, this land, the people." She smiled, the contours of her heart softening in his company. "But what about adventure?" His expression turned serious. "Adventure doesn't always mean leaving." His words lingered, resonating deep within her. Together, they embarked on small treasures of adventure, exploring the nearby woods, picking wildflowers, and discovering hidden gems of beauty that had previously gone unnoticed. They transformed even the simplest tasks tending to the animals, planting seeds into moments filled with laughter. But with these newfound joys came the ever-looming shadow of reality. Unbeknownst to Charlotte, her father had unleashed a relentless search. His connections in the banking world extended far beyond money. He wielded influence and power that sent ripples of fear through the village. Whispers about Charlotte's disappearance grew louder, and soon, a search party was formed, led by the very men who frequented her father's estate. One night, as Samuel and Charlotte shared thoughts about the stars, a sharp knock broke the tranquility. The sound shattered their peace, instilling a jolt of fear. Samuel darted to the back of the house, positioning himself to protect her. "Stay hidden," he whispered urgently as he stepped toward the door. The knock echoed again, more insistent. Charlotte, her heart sank as she recognized her father's voice, tense and demanding. Time felt suspended as fear gripped her. Samuel's presence brought a sense of safety, but it was fleeting against the storm brewing outside. "Charlotte," his voice turned thick with anger and desperation. Every instinct inside her screamed to run. She glanced back at Samuel, who stood resolute, blocking her escape with his steadfast frame. The tension between loyalty and fear coiled tight. Would she face her father, or slip away into the dark and try to return to a normal life? But then she thought of all they had shared, the tenderness of this newfound love, the way Samuel had shown her a life filled with authenticity. It was not just about escaping her father, it was also about choosing something true. Without a word, Charlotte slowly approached the door. She grasped the handle and turned it, forcing herself to breathe as she opened it. Her father stood there, a storm of anger swirling around him. "Charlotte," his fury flared like a wildfire as his eyes fell on Samuel. "You think you can take my daughter? I've been looking for you everywhere." Her voice rang out as she stepped forward, interjecting between him and Samuel. He blinked, taken aback by her defiance. "You are throwing your life away." She pointed toward Samuel. "This is what I want." The clash of wills filled the air. Samuel stood silent but fierce behind her, ready to confront the man who threatened their peace. "Charlotte," her father said, a dangerous calm creeping into his voice. "Leave this boy behind, come home." But she shook her head fiercely, her spirit ignited. "You don't understand who I am." Caught between a storm of emotions, her father's face twisted in outrage. Yet beneath it, a flicker of something else, confusion, perhaps. Had she finally stood her ground? "I will not be your puppet," she declared, her voice steady and unwavering. But uncertainty bubbled beneath the surface. She could see the threat in her father's eyes, the looming danger of losing not just her family but the security that had been her entire life. In that intense moment, Samuel broke through the silence. "Let her be." Her father's gaze flickered between them, searching for weakness, but what he found was an undeniable connection to lives intertwined by rebellion and hope. Charlotte held her breath, her heart pounding as her father finally relented. His voice lowered, yet the charge of anger still crackled. "I'll give you time, but you will return." With that, he turned away, retreating into the night, leaving a chill in his wake. The door closed slowly, sealing away the conflict but not the storm it had brought. Charlotte's resolve cracked, revealing the fear that tangled in her chest. Samuel stepped closer, wrapping a steady arm around her shoulders. "We'll be ready." As dawn broke, the sun's first rays spread warmth into the farmhouse, enveloping them in possibilities. The world felt lighter, yet the heaviness of the decision lingered. But freedom's was not without its burdens. With Samuel by her side, they began to carve their path through the uncertainty. No longer was she merely the banker's daughter. She was Charlotte, a woman who chose love over obligation, a woman shouting her own narrative into the wind. And as they faced the challenges together, every moment only deepened their bond, cementing their commitment to each other and to whatever lay ahead. In the distance, the village slowly stirred awake, unaware of the silent battles within its boundaries. The whispers of rebellion mingled with the first chirps of morning, weaving a story only they could tell. Leaving behind a legacy that reflected courage and vulnerability, Charlotte and Samuel learned that love, born from adversity, had the power to transform not just their lives, but the world around them. The night the banker's daughter fled was only the beginning, a midnight promise unbroken, standing resolute against the dawn. In the dead of night, a lone figure slipped through the moonlit shadows of Willow Creek. The air was thick with both anticipation and fear, and the whisper of leaves echoed on the cool breeze. Charlotte, the banker's daughter, was escaping, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribcage. She could still hear her father's shout from earlier, a thunderous roar that had shattered the stillness of her well-ordered life. Charlotte. Those words echoed in her mind as she made her way toward the edge of the woods. She had long felt like a bird trapped in a gilded cage, each day blending into the next under the oppressive weight of her father's expectations. The mansion loomed behind her, a cold and silent witness to her defiance. Inside those walls, everything was polished silver and fine china, but outside lay the untamed beauty of the world, the one she yearned for with every fiber of her being. As she progressed deeper into the woods, Charlotte paused to catch her breath. The faintest sound of twigs snapping made her heart leap. Was it the village watchman searching for her, or something worse? She had to keep moving, though. To stay would mean surrender. To confront her father's ambitions would mean losing herself entirely. In the heart of the trees, she stumbled upon a dim light flickering through the leaves. Resolved to press on, she let her intuition guide her. After a moment, she found herself standing before a small cabin, its warm glow beckoning her closer. It was there that she met Samuel, the farmhand who had worked on her father's estate. His rugged hands were calloused from labor, but his blue eyes held a warmth and understanding that reached into the depths of her soul. He asked, surprise washing over his features. "I'm running away," she breathed, her chest rising and falling with urgency. "I can't marry him." Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. After a moment of surprise, Samuel stepped back and gestured for her to enter. "Then you should come in." The simplicity of the cabin was both jarring and comforting. It was modest, filled with hand-carved furniture and the scent of wood smoke. She felt warmth blooming inside her, breaking the ice that her father's world had cast over her heart. She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because you deserve to choose your own path," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "And because I've seen you trapped in that world." Encouraged by his conviction, she shared her fears, her dreams, and the life she longed for, one that involved muddy hands and fields of wildflowers instead of underhanded deals and silken dresses. With every word, Charlotte felt the chains of her past begin to loosen. Days turned into weeks, and with Samuel by her side, the world felt alive. They worked the land together, planting vegetables and tending to animals. Charlotte laughed more than she had in years, her heart swelling with a joy she had thought lost to her forever. The dusk painted the skies in hues of purple and gold, and in those moments, as they shared stories under the stars, she began to realize there was more to life than the suffocating expectations of her father. But even in this sanctuary, the shadows of her past lingered. Her father was relentless. Word of Charlotte's disappearance spread quickly, and news quickly reached her father's ears. He possessed connections like a web, and his rage resonated through the village. One evening, just as twilight painted the world in darkness, Charlotte heard a knock that sent ice coursing through her veins. Samuel was in the fields, and she felt her stomach drop as she approached the door. "Charlotte." It was her father's voice, sharper than she remembered, cutting through the stillness. Fear gripped her. In that instant, she had a choice: stay hidden and hope he would leave, or open the door and face the storm. Thoughts raced through her mind. Would he force her back? Would he hurt Samuel? With a shaky breath, Charlotte held the doorknob. She shouted, her voice trembling. He responded, urgency lacing his tone, but the door was calling her. She swung it open, summoning the courage that had carried her so far. His gaze snapped to her, swirling with anger and disbelief. "What have you done?" "No, Father. This is my life." Her voice shook, but it stood firm like a sturdy tree against the winds of a storm. "Choices." He spat, his eyes flaring. The tension hung thick in the air, wrapping around them like a noose. Charlotte felt Samuel's presence behind her, steady and protective. "Let her be," he said, stepping forward. Her father's face twisted, and for a moment she saw the flicker of vulnerability hidden beneath his anger. "You're nothing," he snarled at Samuel, eyes ablaze. "I'm not taking her. She's choosing her life with me," Samuel replied, his voice unwavering. The standstill stretched out, Charlotte caught in the whirlwind of emotions surrounding her. It was a test of wills, a battle of love versus control. She took a deep breath, looking back at Samuel, drawing strength from him. "Please leave," she finally said, a calmness washing over her. For a moment, silence reigned. Her father's expression shifted from rage to something softer, a mix of disappointment and perhaps understanding. "I'll be back," he warned, his voice low and chilling, cutting through the air like a knife. He turned away, retreating into the night, and for the first time, Charlotte felt the weight of his expectations begin to lift. But the storm was far from over. Resistance often created waves that could pull one under. Within the safety of the cabin, Charlotte collapsed into Samuel's chest. "What if he comes back?" Samuel cradled her in his arms, grounding her. "We face it together," he reassured her. With those words, Charlotte felt embers of hope igniting in her heart. Together, they would build their lives piece by piece, with every seed they planted and every moment stolen under the stars. The next few weeks saw some of their happiest days. Samuel showed her the beauty of the land, the way the sun rose over the fields and painted everything in golden hues. They danced in the moonlight, cooked together, and shared dreams about what the future could hold. But beneath the surface, a current of dread continued to pulse, unseen but ever present. Charlotte knew her father wouldn't give up easily. One misty morning, she set out to gather herbs by the stream. As the water sparkled with the first light of dawn, she felt a fleeting sense of peace wash over her. But that peace was shattered by a distant roar. The sound rang through the air, chilling her to the bone. It was her father's voice, laced with fury and desperation. Her heart raced as she sprinted back to the cabin, dread coiling in her stomach. What would he do when he found her? What lengths would he go to reclaim his daughter? Just as she reached the door, she spotted Samuel, standing at the threshold, the fight in his posture evident. Samuel shouted, and Charlotte could see the tension in his body, ready to protect her at all costs. The door slammed open and her father appeared, his face a storm cloud. "You think you can hide from me? You think this?" Charlotte's heart pounded. "We care for each other," he thundered, disbelief etched on his face. "You know nothing of choice," but Samuel stepped forward, eyes blazing with defiance. "She knows more than you think. You've tried to control every aspect of her life." The tension crackled in the air, and Charlotte felt like she was standing on the edge of an abyss, protecting the love she'd found against the patriarchal walls that sought to reclaim her. She cried, her voice rising above the chaos. Her father's expression swayed between fury and disbelief, a man grappling with the idea that his daughter was stepping out of the shadows he'd cast. He shouted before storming off, leaving behind a deafening silence. Charlotte sank to the ground, tears flowing freely. Samuel knelt beside her, enveloping her in his arms. "You fought for yourself, Charlotte," but the fear festered beneath the surface. What would come next? She was startled awake in the dead of night, troubled by nightmares of being chased, captured, and dragged back to that life of confinement. The comfort of Samuel's presence next to her reminded her of the fierce love they had cultivated, yet the specter of her father loomed like a dark cloud. The following days were filled with tension. Charlotte tried to stay present, but a shroud of dread hung over them like a stormy sky ready to burst. They spent twilight hours together, creating memories and laughter, yet the unease seeped in. But they were not simply survivors. They were builders of their own world, a world where love residing in simple yet powerful choices. Then came the day when everything changed. Samuel and Charlotte were at the market in town, their hair tousled and laughter echoing between the stalls, when suddenly Charlotte froze. Her father stood there, surveying the crowd, his gaze fierce and searching. Her heart raced in her chest, a wild drum echoing in her ears. "Samuel, we need to go." The urgency in her voice ignited a fire in his eyes, and together they darted between the stalls, her father's voice echoing behind them. "Charlotte." They ducked into an alley, breaths coming hard and fast. Samuel's hands held her face, grounding her in the frantic moment. "You're safe." But Charlotte could feel the walls closing in. "He won't stop." "Then we fight back," he said softly. In that moment, Charlotte felt her own power returning, embers of fire kindling in her heart. Samuel was right. She had much more at stake than just herself. She had chosen a life of love, freedom, and authenticity. As they emerged from the alley, the sun shone brighter. With hearts racing, they stood together against the looming threat, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The road was uncertain, with struggles ahead, but they would confront it together. And so they did. The whirlwinds of the past faded into the distance as Charlotte took each step forward, arms entwined with Samuel's. They were not simply running from her father, they were stepping into their own lives. A journey that wove their fates together, illuminated as brightly as the stars above on clear nights in the fields of their love. This was a path of chosen struggles and undeniable courage. Together, they would forge a legacy of defiance, love, and unyielding hope in the face of the most arduous storms. And in every sunset, they found strength, a promise that their story was just beginning. The moon hung low in the ink-black sky, casting silver ribbons of light across the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Under its watchful gaze, a figure darted through the shadows, each hurried breath thick with urgency. Charlotte, the banker's daughter, felt her heart race like a firefly in the dark as she moved farther away from the mansion that had once felt like home. Just hours before, her father's voice had boomed through the grand halls, cold and authoritative. The words echoed in her mind, stinging like a slap. Jonathan, an ambitious suitor handpicked by her father, represented everything she despised: the expectations, the control, the suffocating life that awaited her, pressed down like a weight she could no longer bear. She slipped past the iron gates of her father's estate, the once familiar ground beneath her feet now twisted into a foreign terrain. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the trees closed in around her, their branches whispering secrets known only to the stars. She had always loved the woods' every crooked trail, every hidden path. They held promises of freedom, secrets waiting to be unveiled. But tonight they were her sanctuary. A voice broke through the stillness, causing her to freeze. It was Samuel, the farmhand who worked on her father's estate. He'd always had a way of seeing past the gilded facade. She exclaimed, words tumbling out in a rush. "I won't be forced into a marriage I don't want." Samuel's eyes widened, concern etched on his face. "You can't be serious." She interrupted, inhaling sharply, her breath shaking. "I won't live like this anymore." His expression softened, and after a moment he stepped closer. "You can come with me. I have a place nearby." Charlotte felt the weight of his words seep into her. Safe. How long had it been since she'd felt truly safe? She nodded, a mix of fear and hope surging through her veins. Together, they moved deeper into the woods, hearts racing as they fled the invisible shackles that had held her captive for too long. As they reached Samuel's cabin, nestled at the edge of a field that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon, the first rays of dawn began to break. The gentle light spilled over the landscape, wrapping the world in a warm embrace. Inside the humble cabin, the walls bore the scars of time, but they felt inviting, a stark contrast to the cold marble floors of her father's house. "You can rest here," Samuel said, gesturing toward a small cot in the corner. But Charlotte couldn't let herself believe it. Anxiety twisted in her stomach, a reminder that her father would not take her flight lightly. Even if she was miles away, she could almost hear his voice rumbling in the distance, demanding her return. Yet here, in this cabin, surrounded by rustic charm, her spirit began to awaken. Days flowed into one another like a gentle river, and living with Samuel allowed Charlotte to uncover parts of herself she had thought lost forever. They worked together, planting seeds, mending fences, and tending to the animals. Samuel's laughter filled the air, a melody that soothed her troubled heart. He asked one evening as they sat on the porch, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. She raised an eyebrow, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "Your old life, the parties, the dresses," he replied, glancing her way. Charlotte chuckled, shaking her head. "It felt like a beautiful prison. I was always expected to maintain a perfect image." He nodded slowly, understanding reflected in his gaze. But even in this serene bubble, the specter of her father lingered at the edges, a shadow veiled in the corners of her mind. Nightmares gripped her, visions of being dragged back into her former life, of losing her voice. As sleep eluded her, Charlotte began pacing near the window, her heart pounding. One night, as the darkness cloaked the world outside, a cold fear wrapped around her. "Samuel," she whispered, breaking the stillness. He turned, concern threading his features. If he comes, I'll protect you. But trusting felt like stepping off a cliff into a void. Charlotte drew a shaky breath, feeling the heavy weight of uncertainty. It's not just about me now. Charlotte, he said firmly, stepping closer. You didn't drag me into this. You didn't ask for this life, and you can't carry that burden alone. You're not a burden. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something bright, a warmth spreading through her. She murmured, vulnerability spilling from her lips. Then we'll create it together, he replied, determination lighting his eyes. You and me. But in the distance, the winds of change began howling. The village buzzed with rumors of a missing daughter, and whispers of the banker's wrath echoed through the market. News traveled quickly in a tight-knit community, and as the days turned into futile search parties, Charlotte's disappearance became the talk of the town. Then, one fateful evening, the tranquility shattered. Samuel and Charlotte sat by the hearth, their intentions lost in the warmth of the fire when a loud knock echoed through the cabin. A voice bellowed, instantly freezing Charlotte's blood. It was her father's voice, deep and laced with fury. Fear gripped Charlotte like a vice. She hissed, panic flooding her. Stay hidden, he urged, urgency filling his tone. He moved quickly, guiding her toward a small cupboard in the corner. She felt the tremors of dread pulsing through her. Trust me, Samuel whispered, and with that statement he took a step toward the door, ready to confront the storm brewing outside. As she crouched in the cupboard, the darkness engulfed her, her heart racing as she listened to the confrontation unfold. The door creaked open and her father stepped inside, fury radiating from him like an inferno. He demanded, eyes blazing. Samuel met him at the threshold. She's chosen her own path. Her father's voice thundered, echoing off the walls. She is mine. Do it, and it will only prove how little you understand her, Samuel replied, unyielding as he stood his ground. She's more than just your daughter. As Charlotte listened, the tension in the air coiled tighter and tighter. Would her father hurt him? A mix of fear and admiration surged in her. Could this man, this farmhand, really stand up to the banker? Her father screamed, the rage bubbling over. With that final word, a heavy silence fell over the room, and Charlotte realized how deeply Samuel had become a part of her world. Heart racing, she burst from her hiding place, stepping in front of Samuel. She shouted, voice unwavering, strength surging through her. Her father froze, a mix of shock and anger passing over his features. He spat, disbelief coloring his rage. She retorted, standing proudly alongside Samuel. I am not yours to control. Her courage echoed off the walls, reverberating in the silence like a thunderclap. Samuel's presence at her side steadied her, bolstered her resolve. She had run away to find freedom, and now she was reclaiming it. For a long moment, she could see her father struggling with the weight of her words. The proud banker, usually so imposing, appeared fragile in that moment. But he quickly masked it with new anger, facing Samuel with disdain. He spat, his eyes filled with venom. But you will never take her away from me, Samuel responded steadily. She's free now. With those words, the storm inside Charlotte calmed. She could feel it, a shift in her heart. It was time to close that chapter with her father and begin anew. Leave, Charlotte said, her voice lower but undeniably strong. At last, her father hesitated, eyes flickering between anguish and rage. You will come to your senses, he grumbled, turning away as he stormed off into the night. As the door slammed shut behind him, the weight of silence enveloped the cabin. Everything felt different now, lighter but charged with uncertainty. Charlotte sank to the floor, adrenaline fading as relief washed over her. Samuel knelt beside her, resting a comforting hand on her shoulder. You did it. He won't stop, she whispered, doubt creeping back in. If he does, we'll be ready, he promised, determination glimmering in his eyes. It took days for the world to adjust, for Charlotte to find her own footing amidst the fragments of resentment and fear. They resumed their lives, or at least tried to, throwing themselves into field work and building routines. Those days were filled with hard labor, but also simple joys, growing vegetables, cooking meals together, sharing dreams under a glowing sky. Then one sunny afternoon, as they took a break beneath the shade of a large oak tree, Charlotte turned to Samuel. What if I told you I wanted to build something more? He looked at her, curiosity rising in his gaze. I want to start a small market, showcase the produce we grow, maybe invite the town to our little haven. A smile broke over his face, igniting a light in her heart. Charlotte's heart erupted with hope. Together they sketched plans, dreaming of stalls filled with colorful fruits and vegetables, laughter and chatter filling the air. A world that didn't just survive but thrived, a bright future rooted in love and authenticity. As days turned into weeks, there were undoubtedly struggles, but they faced each hurdle together, side by side. And then, one market day, a familiar face showed up at the end of the long path leading to their farm. Her heart dropped as she recognized Jonathan Hastings, her supposed suitor, the man arranged to marry her. "Charlotte," he called out with a smile painted with arrogance. Charlotte shot back, resolve hardening inside her. "I came to take you home," he said, his tone infuriatingly calm. Samuel stepped forward, tension flooding the air. Jonathan's brow raised, astonished by the farmhouse vibe. "You're seriously standing up to me, a farmhand?" But Charlotte stood firm, hand clasped in Samuel's. "You don't understand, Jonathan." In the face of their love, the distance between Charlotte and Jonathan became glaringly evident. Her heart soared as Samuel stood beside her, unwavering and strong. Jonathan scoffed, challenges lacing his tone. "I've chosen and that's enough," she replied, fire in her eyes. "You've lost, Jonathan." With a huff of indignation, Jonathan turned on his heel, never looking back. As she watched him walk away, Charlotte felt an undeniable weight lift. She had finally taken control of her life, unraveled the threads her father had spun, and discovered the strength within. In that moment, the sun broke free from the clouds, pouring warmth all around. Samuel stepped closer, their hands entwining, and she breathed in the beauty of the world they had built together. It wasn't without its challenges, but escaping the life expected of her had led to unexpected joys. Charlotte began to understand the true meaning of freedom. It's not just about fleeing. It's about choosing to lay roots in love, to decide who you want to be, and to embrace the rich tapestry of life beyond societal constraints. The farmhouse became a place of laughter and dreams. Neighbors ventured in, sweets shared and stories exchanged, the echo of community filling their lives. Charlotte grew stronger each day, forging a new identity, one not defined by her father or arranged marriages, but by the love she had discovered. In the heart of Willow Creek, under the radiant glow of the sun, the banker's daughter had found more than freedom. She had unearthed her voice, her spirit, and the love that would carry her forward, weaving new stories into the fabric of her life, a vibrant tale of defiance, belonging, and the unquenchable fire of the heart. The rain fell in sheets, heavy and unforgiving, drumming against the cobblestones of Willow Creek. Lightning split the night sky, casting sharp shadows as Charlotte stood at the edge of the woods, her heart racing like a wild animal trapped in a cage. The massive silhouette of her family's mansion loomed behind her, a dark fortress that symbolized everything she was trying to escape. But it wasn't just the mansion. It was the weight of her father's expectations, the plans he had laid out for her, the life she did not choose. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to herself, her breath fogging in the cool night air. She was the banker's daughter, destined to marry a man she barely knew, to fit into a mold her father had created. But tonight, she felt the fierce stirrings of rebellion. This was her life, and she would take it back. With each step deeper into the woods, the sounds of the bustling village faded away, the rhythm of her heartbeat growing louder. Just hours earlier, she had overheard a conversation between her father and one of his associates about her impending marriage to Jonathan Hastings, a well-to-do young man who was more interested in her father's wealth than in her. She had listened, hidden behind the heavy drapes of the parlor, coaxed into silence by fear. But something inside her snapped, a dam breaking wide open, unleashing her pent-up anguish and resolve. Then came the glimmer of hope. As she ventured deeper into the forest, Charlotte spotted a flicker of light emanating from a small cabin, a haven of warmth amidst her turmoil. She couldn't help but think of Samuel, the farmhand who worked on her father's estate. Unlike the men her father surrounded her with, Samuel was genuine. He had always treated her with respect, seeing her as someone, not just a name or a legacy. More than once, they had exchanged glances under the sunlit fields, shy smiles and fleeting moments. It was silly, really. She'd always been told that as the banker's daughter, she should be above such things. But standing there drenched in rain and fear, Charlotte decided she would seek refuge in that cabin, in Samuel's kindness, if he was even there. As she approached, the door creaked open before she could knock. Samuel took a step back, surprise flashing across his face, then quickly replaced by concern. "Charlotte, I need to escape," she panted, the urgency spilling out. "I can't go home, not now." Samuel studied her for a moment, reading the fear and determination etched into her features. Without a word, he stepped aside, allowing her into the warmth of his cabin. The scent of wood smoke hung thick in the air, mingling with the perfume of wildflowers brought in from the garden. Here, she felt the first stirrings of safety, a sanctuary from the tempest she was leaving behind. He asked, concern threading through his voice. "I don't care," she replied, shaking off the rain that clung to her like a shroud. With every word that passed between them, Charlotte felt lighter, the burdens of her past fading like the storm clouds outside. The mix of fear and exhilaration coursed through her, and for once, she was free to be herself, away from expectations and judgments. Days turned into nights, and as the storm outside subsided, a new sense of calm settled within Charlotte. Samuel's cabin became a refuge, each shared meal and evening spent by the fire weaving an unlikely bond between them. They talked about everything and nothing: dreams, fears, and the mundane realities of life. He asked one evening, leading her outside to admire the stars as they twinkled in the inky sky. "I don't know," she admitted, taking a deep breath. "I've never really thought about what I want." He pressed gently, scrutinizing her with those piercing blue eyes. Charlotte hesitated, her mind swirling with possibilities. "I want to feel alive." He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. But even as their days filled with laughter, Charlotte couldn't shake the fear that her father would come looking for her. Her heart sank when thoughts of her family crept in, memories of sleepless nights and darkened rooms being pushed toward a future she hadn't chosen. One late afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the trees, they were interrupted by a loud knock on the cabin door. Charlotte's heart leaped into her throat. "Open up." The voice was brusque and commanding, slicing through the quiet like a knife. Samuel reached for her hand, eyes wide with alarm. Charlotte felt panic surge. "No, I can't hide. Trust me," he said urgently, pushing her toward a small cupboard in the corner. With a heavy heart, she squeezed inside just as the door flew open. Her father stormed in, dripping with authority and anger. "Where is she, Samuel? I know she's here," he spat, eyes like ice. "I haven't seen her, sir," Samuel replied coolly, but Charlotte could hear the tension in his voice. The words hung in the air, thick with tension, as Charlotte held her breath. She could barely hear her father's voice as he paced the room, his frustration pouring out into every corner. "She's a foolish girl, running off like this. Demanding will not change her mind," Samuel said quietly. Charlotte's heart raced, each beat echoing the fight happening just inches away from her. Truth was that her heart belonged to Samuel now. She didn't want to go home. She wanted to embrace the life she'd never known, the life she was beginning to forge. "You will pay for this insubordination," her father's voice thundered, raw with anger. At that moment, Charlotte's resolve boiled over. She needed to break free of the chains that held her, not just from her father, but also from her own fear. Summoning every ounce of courage, she pushed open the cupboard door and stepped out, facing her father. She commanded, her voice ringing with newfound strength. Her father turned, shock washing over his features as he took in the sight of her standing there, no longer a scared girl but a fierce woman. She stood her ground, heart pounding but unrelenting. Samuel stepped beside her, his presence lending her strength. "She's made her choice," he said firmly, drawing a line in the sand. Charlotte's father looked between them, his fury bubbling beneath the surface, but something in his gaze shifted. "You think this is a game?" But as she looked at Samuel, holding her ground against the storm of her father's wrath, Charlotte found clarity. "No." For a moment they stood there in deafening silence, the weight of her father's expectations crumbling around them. "You will regret this," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Perhaps," she replied, her tone unwavering. With a flare of anger, her father stormed from the cabin, a tornado of rage that left Charlotte breathless. The door slammed behind him, cloaking them in an uneasy silence, but within her the storm had calmed. "Charlotte," Samuel breathed, relief flooding his voice as he turned to her. "I can't believe I did," she murmured, still trembling with adrenaline. But deep down, she knew it was just the beginning. In the following days, Charlotte settled into her new life with an intensity that surprised her. Fear still lingered in the shadows, but it mingled with something brighter, a fierce resolve to carve her own path. She and Samuel began to forge dreams together, embarking on plans to turn his small farm into something more, a place that would become a community hub, a market where people could gather, share, and connect. As they worked side by side, a bond grew deeper between them, a thread woven with trust, hope, and playful banter. They spent hours planting, harvesting, and preparing for the market, each shared smile a reminder of what they were building. Time blurred forward, seasons turning from lush greens to autumn golds, and the first market day approached with the promise of something new. On a crisp Saturday morning, they set up their stand, lay out vibrant produce, fresh bread, and herbs that filled the air with delightful scents. The small crowd that gathered was buzzing with excitement, and Charlotte felt a thrill. This was her doing, this was her freedom. But as she smiled, chatting with townsfolk, the sense of unease crept back in. Where was her father? Had he found out? Would he come to ruin everything she had worked for? Then, just as uncertainty began to worm its way into her heart, she spotted a familiar figure approaching. It was Jonathan Hastings. "Charlotte," he called out, his tone smooth and insincere. The laughter around her faded, and she felt Samuel tense at her side. Charlotte replied, steeling herself. "I came to make you an offer," he said, his demeanor slick as oil. "Come back with me. Your father is willing to overlook all this." "I don't want any part of it," she said firmly, the resolve pushing through her nerves. "Stop playing games, Charlotte," Jonathan scoffed, stepping closer. With that statement, something inside her snapped. She declared, feeling Samuel's presence bolstering her. Jonathan turned to Samuel, his sneer mocking. "What do you know about her life?" "I know more about her than you ever will," Samuel replied, his voice steady. Their words hung thick in the air, and Charlotte felt the tension escalate. But instead of fear, she felt a surge of empowerment. She exclaimed, her voice fierce and unwavering, "With Samuel." Jonathan scoffed, eyes narrowing in disdain. "You'll regret this decision, you'll see." But Charlotte steeled herself, anchored by the truth of her own choices. With that, Jonathan's mask slipped, revealing the anger underneath. He turned and stormed away, defeated but not vanquished. As he disappeared into the crowd, a lightness filled the air around her. "You stood your ground," Samuel breathed, eyes shining with admiration. She realized, her heart swelling. And in that moment, Charlotte found solace in the life she was creating, surrounded by the community she had begun to foster. They spent that day celebrating their triumph, laughter and joy mingling with the chatter of neighbors as they exchanged goods, made new friends, and reveled in the warmth of shared stories. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, she knew that. But with every step they took together, Charlotte felt the chains of her past begin to dissolve. She was no longer the banker's daughter or a pawn in someone else's game. She was Charlotte, a woman who had run into the night only to emerge into the light, a woman ready to embrace her own future, boldly and unapologetically. In the months that followed, the small market flourished under their care and commitment, a symbol of resilience and hope. Charlotte took pride in her work and knew, deep down, that she had made the right choice. With Samuel at her side, she had discovered not only the power of her own voice, but also the beauty of true partnership founded on respect and love. Here was a life they were building together, one that imbued her spirit with a vitality she had never known. As they stood at the market's opening on a sunny afternoon, the buzz of conversation filling their ears, Charlotte faced the horizon with a sense of purpose. She had chosen this life, unwound the threads holding her captive, and in doing so had truly set herself free. And as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the landscape, she knew that she could face whatever came next, as long as she remained true to herself and to the love she had fought so fiercely to find. Charlotte stood at her window, staring out into the night, her breath fogging the glass. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the sprawling gardens of her father's estate. Inside, the opulent halls echoed with laughter and clinking glasses. It was just another lavish party filled with important guests, but all she felt was suffocated. "Another day, another dollar," she muttered to herself, a phrase she'd heard her father use countless times. She didn't care about the figures being exchanged in the ballroom. They weren't her figures, her dreams. All her life, she'd been groomed to inherit her father's name, his empire. Yet here, in this moment, she felt more like a pawn than ever. As the laughter grew louder, Charlotte's resolve sharpened. She turned away from the window, her heart pounding with desperation. Tonight was the night. She had to get out. Just a few hours earlier, she had overheard her father discussing her future with a guest, Jonathan Hastings, a man she had never liked. The deal was already set. She would be engaged by the end of the week. "We need this union," her father had said, his tone flat. She thought, anger coursing through her veins. She was not a business deal, she was a person, with dreams, passions, hopes. Outside, raindrops began to patter against the windows like a plea for her to escape. Gathering her courage, Charlotte slipped on a sturdy pair of boots, grabbed her worn leather satchel, and stepped into the darkness. The grand mansion behind her felt both like a prison and a familiar home. Each step she took toward the edge of the property felt like an act of defiance. As she wove through the gardens, her heart raced not just from fear but exhilaration. She wasn't just running away, she was reclaiming her life. Every shadow around her felt alive, every bush a witness to her act of rebellion. She knew exactly where she was headed, the small, wooden cabin where Samuel, the farmhand, lived just beyond the tree line. Samuel was an unexpected beacon of light in her constrained world. He was strong, simple in the best of ways, with a gentle laugh that made her heart flutter. His kindness was a stark contrast to the cold, calculated environment her father created. For the first time, she felt drawn to someone who saw her as more than just the banker's daughter. As she approached the cabin, the rain began to pour heavier. She knocked hesitantly, a mix of hope and dread bubbling inside her. The door creaked open, revealing Samuel, his expression shifting from surprise to concern as he took in her muddy clothes and frantic demeanor. "Charlotte," he asked, urgency lacing his voice. "I need to stay here," she gasped. "I can't go back." Understanding flickered in his eyes, and without a second thought, he stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. The inside of the cabin was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the chill of the storm outside. A flickering candle cast soft shadows on the walls, illuminating the simple but cozy furnishings. Now inside, Charlotte felt a wave of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. Samuel pressed, closing the door behind her. He took her hand, searching her eyes for answers. "I overheard my father. He's made arrangements for my engagement to Jonathan Hastings," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I can't do it, Samuel." His grip tightened around her hands, a silent promise echoing between them. "You don't have to go back." Charlotte glanced around, her heart swelling with gratitude. This cabin, filled with warmth and light, had become her refuge. "But what about you?" "I'm just a farmhand," he shrugged, but there was no sadness in his voice, only determination. "You're not a burden, Charlotte." As the rain drummed relentlessly against the roof, a shared spark ignited between them. They spent the next few days developing routines, filling the hours with laughter and a sense of shared purpose. They worked side by side, tending to the land and preparing meals by the fire. Charlotte was immersed in a world she had only glimpsed before, one filled with simple joys and honest hard work. There was a freedom in the way the days unfolded, with no expectations weighing her down. She relished the mundane tasks, discovering strength in the rhythm of life outside her father's mansion. After years of feeling trapped, she finally felt alive. But in the depths of her mind, a nagging worry gnawed at her. What would happen when her father noticed she was gone? He held power, influence, connections that could reach into the heart of the village. And if he sent someone to retrieve her, would Samuel be put in danger? One stormy night, as they sat by the fire, Charlotte spoke her fears aloud. "What if he finds out?" Samuel's expression grew serious. "He may come looking, but we'll be ready." But as the passing days turned to weeks, Charlotte's initial sense of freedom began to fade, replaced by an undercurrent of dread. She had started this journey so bravely, but the whisper of her father's anger loomed in the background, and she felt the weight of doubt creeping back in. Then one fateful evening, a loud knock shattered the quiet of their cabin, followed by the authoritative voice of her father. Charlotte. Her heart dropped through the floorboards. Instinctively, Samuel stepped in front of her, his body tense. He urged urgently. Charlotte's voice trembled as fear clawed at her. "Trust me," Samuel whispered, his eyes steady. Panic surged through her veins as she ducked into a small closet, clutching the edges of the door. Charlotte's breaths were quiet, but the thundering of her heart filled her ears as her father's footsteps echoed into the cabin. "Samuel," he bellowed. "I haven't seen her, sir," Samuel replied calmly, although Charlotte could hear the tension in his voice. Her father snapped, rage rippling in his words. "She's still my daughter." Heart racing, Charlotte strained to hear through the wooden panels, desperate to protect Samuel. What would her father do if he found her? But then, a sudden wave of determination surged through her. She couldn't let fear dictate her life any longer. She had fought for her freedom, and she would stand firm. Pushing open the closet door with a deep breath, Charlotte stepped out, confronting the chaos. She shouted. Her father turned, choked off mid-sentence. "Charlotte," she squared her shoulders. "I'm taking control of my life." He roared, eyes blazing. Charlotte shot back, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and rage. The tension in the room became palpable, both men's anger crackling like static in the air. Samuel stood his ground beside her, a silent vow of support that gave her strength. "You're a foolish girl," her father spat. "Perhaps," she replied, unwavering. A moment hung in the air, taut and fragile. Her father's fury simmered beneath the surface, but something else glimmered behind his eyes: confusion, perhaps even regret. He turned sharply, storming out of the cabin as quickly as he had come, leaving Charlotte breathless and trembling. A deep silence followed, filled with uncertainty. Charlotte felt both victorious and vulnerable. She had stood her ground, but the storm was far from over. Samuel turned to her, relief flooding his features. "I was terrified," she admitted, her voice shaking. "He will," Samuel replied, determination etched in his tone. "But we'll be ready." Days slipped into weeks, full of the mundane joys of farm life, yet each one felt heavy with anticipation. Behind each corner, Charlotte felt the weight of her father's looming presence. They kept the windows closed, the curtains drawn, and prepared for the impending storm. Then came news from the village. Whispers floated through the air while Charlotte shopped for fresh produce. Someone would ask. With every comment, Charlotte felt anxiety bubble up. Would her father's rage spill into their lives? Would he send people to find her? She could not bear the thought of bringing danger to Samuel's doorstep. One evening, as twilight cloaked the land, they sat on the porch sharing stories, but anxiety prickled at the edges of her happiness. "Do you ever wonder what's on the other side?" she asked, her eyes searching Samuel's. He paused, contemplating. "There's always more to see, but we have to be cautious." The tension returned, wrapping around them like a thick fog. She wanted to be brave. She wanted to face the future head-on. But somewhere in the depths of her mind, fear twisted like a dark vine, threatening to strangle her resolve. Then, without warning, chaos erupted. Footsteps thundered down the path, and a familiar voice cut through the night air. "Charlotte," her heart raced. It was Jonathan Hastings. Samuel growled, his body tightening beside her, but Charlotte's heart sank further. "I can't hide anymore," she said, stepping forward. Samuel asked, concern etching his features. "I have to," she replied. With that, she pushed the door open, facing Jonathan as he stood there, chest heaving, anger radiating from him. "Charlotte, I'm not going anywhere with you," she declared, her voice steady. "You've come to take me back, but I'm my own person." Fury twisted Jonathan's face. "You'll regret this decision," Charlotte shot back. "I refuse to go back to a life dictated by someone else." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You'll be sorry once your father finds out where you are." She shouted, the words fierce and liberating. Samuel moved protectively beside her, and Jonathan's expression darkened even further. "You think he can protect you?" With each word, tension crackled in the air, but Charlotte felt a spark of something else, the knowledge that she had found her footing, her voice. Jonathan recoiled, a mix of shock and disbelief crossing his features. "You've made a terrible mistake," he hissed, before turning sharply and storming back down the path. In the wake of his departure, the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Charlotte turned to Samuel, disbelief swirling in her chest. "You did," he said, warmth flooding his gaze. Together they stepped onto the porch, breathing in the fresh night air, but something deep inside Charlotte began to shift. She felt lighter, unburdened by the threat that had loomed over her for so long. As days turned into weeks, Charlotte and Samuel worked relentlessly on the farm. They tilled the soil, sowed seeds, and planted flowers, the vibrancy of life slowly weaving back into place. The market blossomed, bursting with colors and flavors, while eclectic conversations filled the air. Each passing week drew more neighbors to the farm, bringing a sense of community that she had never experienced before. They weren't just customers, they were friends. Charlotte began to find joy in the mundane tasks. Each day felt purposeful. Samuel became more than just a beacon of light, he was her partner. One warm evening, as twilight softened the sky, Charlotte turned to Samuel, a smile playing on her lips. "It is," he replied, meeting her gaze. "You've chosen a life, Charlotte. Let's keep building together," he smiled back, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. And as the months rolled by, their bond deepened, the laughter shared binding them together in ways they never anticipated. They began to discuss dreams beyond the farm, travels, exploring the world, discovering new horizons. The more they talked of the future, the more Charlotte felt liberated from her past. But life has a way of weaving unexpected turns into its fabric. One fateful dawn dawned as Charlotte, wide awake, prepared the morning coffee. The scent filled the cabin and she felt a warm glow spread through her. Just as she set the cups down, her heart stopped. A shadow loomed before the doorway, familiar yet menacing. It was her father, anger radiating off him like static electricity. Time slowed. He demanded, eyes ablaze. "You think you can live here with this?" Charlotte felt rooted in place, the weight of old worlds colliding with the new. "You don't understand," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm happy here." He stepped closer, fury in his tone. Her heart thundered in her chest as Samuel stepped forward, panic etched across his face. "Stay out of this, farmhand. You're nothing," her father spat, contempt lacing his words. But Charlotte's heart surged with courage. "I'm making my choices, my happiness, not yours." A stillness fell over the cabin, suspended in time. For the first time, her father looked unsure. His grip on his power wavered as uncertainty danced across his expression. Yet before Charlotte could breathe, he narrowed his eyes, anger spiraling back. "No daughter of mine will live this kind of life." With that, he turned sharply and stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him. In the echo of silence, Charlotte felt the world spin beneath her. Samuel stepped beside her, their arms brushing together, a silent vow of unity. "You were remarkable," he breathed, but Charlotte barely heard him. A storm brewed within her, a whirlwind of emotions. She asked, her voice thick with uncertainty. "If he does, we'll face it," Samuel reassured her, holding her gaze steady. That night they sat in the cabin, the fire's glow weaving shadows across the walls. Charlotte clung to Samuel's warmth, the flicker of hope brightening the darkness that loomed. She whispered, uncertainty threading through her. Samuel took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "We start anew." In the days that followed, Charlotte found herself immersed in the heartbeat of their farm, cultivating not just crops but also her own identity. She threw herself into the rhythm of life, learning to plant seeds of resilience, hope, and love. Yet a knot remained in her chest, an undercurrent of anxiety that whispered ominously. Although she began to mend the fractures of her soul, she knew that confrontation was still looming. But as days fused together, Charlotte realized that she was not alone. She shared her fears with Samuel, and the bond between them deepened, the trust blossoming into something powerful. She slowly learned that facing the future didn't need to be done alone. Months went by, seasons changed, and soon winter cloaked the land in a blanket of white. They bundled up, working through the cold, building more than just a market. They were building a life together, nurturing not just the earth but the love that grew between them. The night of the first snowfall, they stood hand in hand, watching the glisten of the snow under the pale moonlight. It felt as though they had woven their own world, dreams that had once felt so distant now unfolding before them. "Look at how beautiful it is," Charlotte mused, a sense of peace washing over her. Samuel squeezed her hand, warmth radiating through the cold. Yet that peaceful night couldn't last forever. Just as Charlotte started to truly settle into her life, the storm she had long feared began to gather. Footsteps approached again, louder this time, heavy with intent. Her heart raced as the door swung open, and in stepped Jonathan Hastings, his expression dark and determined. "Charlotte," he said quietly, eyes boring into her. Every fiber of Charlotte's being tensed. Here was the moment she had both dreaded and anticipated. "I'm not going back," she declared, her voice unwavering, but Jonathan stepped closer, confidence swirling within him. "You think this life can offer you happiness?" Charlotte shouted, her voice rising. Jonathan laughed cruelly, a hint of contempt in his tone. A flash of anger ignited within her. "You don't understand. It's not about the status or wealth. I've found love here." He shook his head, incredulous. "Your father has made it clear he'll hunt you down until he finds you." With every word he spoke, Charlotte felt her spirit strengthen. A moment of silence encapsulated the room, and Samuel stepped beside her, unyielding in his stance. Jonathan scoffed, anger veiling his voice. "I'm not afraid," Charlotte replied, defiance flourishing in her tone. The tension swelled as Jonathan's eyes turned steely. "Foolish girl." But just as he turned to leave, Charlotte stepped towards him, her voice steady. "You've come to threaten me, but it won't work." With that final declaration, Jonathan stormed off, leaving Charlotte breathless but emboldened. In the days that followed, faced with the possibility of losing everything she had built, Charlotte and Samuel leaned into each other for strength. Together, they prepared for whatever storm might come their way, hand in hand, ready to withstand the forces challenging their love. Then one bleak morning, a figure loomed in the distance, dark and ominous against the gray sky. It was her father, flanked by previous associates, marching toward the farmhouse with a swagger that commanded attention. Charlotte's heart dropped, dread pounding in her chest. "He's come," she whispered, turning to Samuel, her breath shaky. "Stay beside me," he said, a steady foundation amidst the shifting tides. As they stood at the entrance, her father demanded entry, his voice cutting through the air. "Charlotte," she shouted, stepping forward, her heart pounding fiercely. He approached, fury and desperation etched across his face. "You're making a mistake, daughter." Charlotte felt a shift within, the fear that had plagued her for so long igniting into a fierce flame. "The only thing I understand is what I want." Her father raged, but this time his words held less power over her. "Let her be," Samuel interjected, stepping protectively before Charlotte. Her father spat, incredulous. "Watch me," Samuel replied, his voice unwavering. The air crackled between all of them, the tension thick enough to slice through. But Charlotte felt something deep within, a sense of strength blooming like never before. "Father, you can't control me anymore." Her father paused, disbelief flashing over his features, but Charlotte saw the cracks in his armor. "You'll regret this," he warned, but this time his voice lacked its usual conviction. "I won't regret it," she replied firmly, an unwavering light in her eyes. As her father turned, storming away, Charlotte felt a wave of liberation wash over her. Together with Samuel, they had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to forge their own path forward. Days turned into weeks again, and Charlotte began building a community of strength around her. People came to their farm for the warmth, the joy, and the authenticity they had woven into every corner of their lives. She had transformed her fears into resilience, and she stood firmly beside Samuel, building a future shaped by love and possibility. It was a world layered with authenticity and richness, one that she had chosen through every challenge and every storm. And as the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, casting a golden glow over their little domain, Charlotte found herself believing in possibilities once again. The banker's daughter had fled, yes, but in her flight, she had found her self-worth more than all the riches in the world. Together, hand in hand, they embraced the future, unafraid. Life unfolded into colors she'd never imagined, blooming as vibrantly as the flowers around her. The journey was far from over, but Charlotte knew that it was hers to live, with every heartbeat filled with courage and love. Charlotte stood in the shadowy corner of her opulent bedroom, her heart pounding louder than the rumble of thunder outside. The grand chandelier flickered ominously, casting dancing shadows on the walls of her father's mansion. She could hear the laughter from the lavish party below, but it felt like a world away from her current reality, a gilded cage that suffocated her spirit. Tonight, the stakes were higher than ever. Her father had finally announced her engagement to Jonathan Hastings, a man of wealth and standing, carefully selected to elevate the family's status in the town. But Charlotte was not a pawn in her father's game. She was a woman with a heart, dreams, and a longing for freedom that had only grown stronger with each passing day. With a shuddering breath, she glanced back at the party, illuminated by laughter and clinking glasses. Another day, another life, she whispered to herself. A life dictated by men wrapped in fine suits and embroidered ties, oblivious to her plight. Her mind raced back to the countless moments when her own wishes had been sidelined: her education, her dreams of travel, and the man she had hoped to love one day. But tonight, she would take her destiny into her own hands. The words "I do" would never slip from her lips in a ceremony devoid of choice. She could not let that happen. As she peered through the rain-streaked window, spotting the dark outline of the woods, a powerful urge surged within her. This was her moment. With trembling hands, she packed a satchel with only the essentials: a change of clothes, a small amount of money, and her mother's locket, a symbol of the love she had once felt. Holding the locket tightly, she felt a rush of courage. This was the last moment she would spend feeling trapped. Sneaking down the grand staircase, Charlotte's heart raced. Each step felt like it echoed, her father's voice drowned in a sea of chatter as she crept through the back hall. Finally, she slipped out into the cool night air, the thunder rolling above, as though the universe itself was cheering her on. The woods loomed ahead, a dark and inviting shroud, and she dashed toward them, her adrenaline driving her forward. The rain began to fall harder, but Charlotte welcomed it. It felt like a baptism, a cleansing from all the expectations that had weighed her down. She moved quickly, each step lighting a fire beneath her. As she entered the woods, the world transformed. The trees stood tall like ancient guardians, and the rain-soaked earth squelched beneath her boots. For the first time in ages, she could breathe. But lurking in the back of her mind was a growing alarm. What if her father discovered her absence? He had eyes in every corner of town, and there were always whispers floating through the air. As she navigated the thick foliage, she pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on what lay ahead. Somewhere deeper in these woods was Samuel, the farmhand who had unknowingly captured her heart through their brief encounters. He worked tirelessly on her father's estate. Every day, they would exchange fleeting glances filled with unspoken words. He was kind, grounded, and genuine, a stark contrast to the shallow world she inhabited. The thought of him gave her the strength to keep moving. After what felt like an eternity, the cabin appeared in the distance, a modest structure with warm light spilling from the windows. Samuel was her beacon. She knocked on the door, her heart racing, unsure of how he would react. The door creaked open, and there stood Samuel, bare-chested and tousled from a long day of work. The surprise in his eyes quickly morphed into alarm. "Charlotte, I ran away," she admitted breathlessly, water dripping from her hair. "I can't go back." A mix of concern and resolve crossed his face. "Come in." Inside the cabin, warmth enveloped her, a stark contrast to the frigid storm raging outside. The scent of wood smoke and something hearty simmering on the stove filled the air. This small haven seemed to pulse with life, inviting her in. "But Samuel, your life is here," she said, hesitating. "I can't impose on you." He stared at her, intensity radiating from his gaze. "You're not imposing, you're safe here." As the rain lashed against the windows, a flood of emotions washed over her. For the first time, she felt seen, not as the banker's daughter, but as Charlotte, a woman with agency. "I don't know what to do next," she admitted, vulnerability naked in her voice. Samuel moved closer, a comforting presence. "Let's take it one step at a time." Days turned into weeks, and in that cozy cabin, Charlotte began to reclaim her identity. They spent mornings tending to the small garden behind the cabin, learning how to cultivate vegetables, and evenings gathered around the fire, talking about dreams and fears. In the simplicity of it all, her spirit soared. Yet, as stolen moments turned into cherished memories, a shadow hovered at the edges of her newfound happiness. While she reveled in the freedom of her escape, the specter of her father loomed ever larger. He would not take her defiance lightly. One fateful night, the storm outside mirrored the turbulent thoughts swirling in her mind. They were preparing dinner when a loud knock jolted them both. Samuel's expression shifted from warmth to alarm. "Stay here," he instructed, gliding toward the door. She gripped his arm, panic rising. "No, then we need to be careful," he replied, eyes firm. The tension in the air crackled as Samuel opened the door, revealing a flash of familiar authority. Her father demanded, his voice a chilling blend of anger and desperation. Charlotte's heart sank as she pressed herself against the wall, fear coursing through her. What would her father do? "She's not here," Samuel replied steadfastly, eyes unwavering. Her father barked. Charlotte could hear the anger rising in Samuel's throat. "I won't betray her." Her father's eyes blazing, he stepped inside the cabin. "You think you can hold her against her will?" Drawing back, Charlotte took a breath of courage, stepping into the light. Her voice was steadier than she felt. He turned to her, astonishment replacing rage. "Charlotte, you don't know what you're doing. This farmhand is the only one who sees me for who I really am," she shouted back, fire igniting inside her. They stood, facing each other, father and daughter, the storm raging outside. In that moment, Charlotte felt the weight of years of silence and compliance shatter. Her father's expression twisted into something wrong. "I will not let you throw your life away." But Charlotte found strength in her defiance. "No." Her father glared at Samuel, who stood by her side, unwavering in his support. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. I'm ready to face the consequences." With a defeated snarl, her father stormed out, leaving behind a whirlwind of emotions. The door echoed shut, sealing away years of control. In the aftermath, Charlotte sank to the floor, hands shaking. "You chose," Samuel said softly, grounding her. He knelt next to her, eyes filled with fierce determination. But doubt still clung to her heart, a whispering shadow lurking in the corners of her mind. "We'll be ready," he reassured her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. As days turned into nights and seasons began to change, the atmosphere around the cabin felt charged. They worked hard on the small farm, finding solace in the rhythm of life outside the confines of Charlotte's old world. She learned to plant seeds in the garden, and with each new sprout, a new resolve blossomed in her heart. But the fear of her father lurking in the shadows never fully faded. Until one day, whispers of discord reached her ears. People in the village had begun to talk about the banker's daughter who had run away. "She's lost her mind," they would say, their whispers sharp thorns piercing the air. It clawed at Charlotte, dredging up doubt. The world had far-reaching eyes, and they were always watching. But every time fear crept in, Samuel would be there, grounding her, reminding her of the life they were building together. The laughter, the simplicity, and the joys of newfound freedom. One crisp morning, just as the sun broke over the horizon, she and Samuel stood at the edge of the fields, a golden glow warming the earth. Charlotte turned to Samuel, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me," she said, sincerity threading through her voice. He met her gaze, a spark of something unspoken hanging between them. "You're stronger than you realize," he replied softly. The bond between them slowly deepened, weaving their lives into a beautiful tapestry. As laughter filled the cabin, Charlotte felt lighter, discovering the beauty of trust, companionship, and love. She had chosen this life, and it was blooming in ways she had never imagined. But just as peace began to settle, her father's shadow flickered back into her life like an unwelcome guest. One evening, after an exhausting day, she and Samuel stood outside, watching the stars sprinkle across the sky. There was a certain magic in sharing those quiet moments, but just as Charlotte felt the warmth of comfort settle around them, the stillness shattered. A commotion echoed in the distance, torches flickering against the night. A group of men from the village approached, led by no other than Jonathan Hastings. He shouted, his voice grim, heart pounding. Charlotte felt her stomach drop. How could he have found her here? It wasn't safe. She exclaimed, fear tinging her voice. "Stay here," Samuel insisted, stepping forward. Jonathan called, his voice wrapping around her like a snake. "You can't hide forever." "I'm not going back," she declared, voice steady. The men encircled the cabin, tension high, as Jonathan continued to taunt her resolve. "You think this is a life? Raw, painful." His words clawed at her, but with a steady heartbeat, Charlotte took a step forward. "You don't understand what it means to live freely," she replied, newfound strength coursing through her. Jonathan shot back, his irritation bubbling under the surface. She shouted, fueling her inner fire. Before Jonathan could respond, Samuel moved protectively in front of her, fists clenched. "Step aside, Farmhand," Jonathan demanded, glaring. But dramatically, Charlotte stepped beside Samuel, refusing to back down. "No." The standoff hung in the air, palpable and daunting as the flickering torches illuminated faces filled with fury. But at that moment, Charlotte knew she had to be brave. She had fought for this life, and she wouldn't let it be taken from her. With a huff of exasperation, Jonathan turned to the men. "We'll find her another way." As the group dispersed into the night, Charlotte felt both relief and fear wash over her. She whispered weakly, tears gathering in her eyes. Samuel wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "You stood your ground, you showed them your strength." Her voice trembled, filled with uncertainty. "I know so," he replied confidently. In the days that followed, Charlotte's resolve only strengthened. She knew her father could not dictate her life any longer, nor could Jonathan's threats bury her under his weight. This was her time to flourish, to embrace every challenge. With Samuel at her side, she dove into her work with newfound vigor. They tended to the land together, building their hopes into something tangible. Each planting season stirred not just the earth, but also dreams. They began to unveil together a farm thriving on the spirit of resilience and love. The warmth of community wrapped around them as neighbors began flocking to the market, sharing laughter, stories, and a sense of belonging that filled them both with joy. Charlotte began mentoring the children, teaching them about the land, sowing seeds not just in the soil, but in the hearts of the future. Yet even as life blossomed around them, the storm of her past lingered on the horizon. It was as if her father watched from afar, plotting, waiting for the moment to strike again. As summer faded to fall, Charlotte felt a nip in the air, a reminder that change was on the way. One stormy night, just as she and Samuel huddled by the fire, the door slammed open and in walked her father, eyes ablaze. The tension in the air snapped tight. He roared, breathless with anger. "You will return home." She shouted back, even as fear crept into her chest. Samuel stiffened beside her, a protector standing firm. "After all I've done for you, all the years I sacrificed." He ground out, fury fueling the fire around him. Charlotte replied, standing her ground. Her father's words dripped with disdain, but there was something liberating in her defiance. "You don't control my future." The room crackled with tension as father and daughter faced off, deep rifts manifesting in the space between them. Charlotte could see the fury in her father's eyes, but it was mixed with disbelief, a man unmoored by his own sense of power. "Go away now, and this will not end well for either of you," he hissed, eyes narrowing. Standing firm beside Samuel, Charlotte stood defiant. "You've underestimated me for too long. I refuse to go back to a life I didn't choose." With a harrowing glare, her father turned and stormed out, but not before casting one last warning. "I will find you, Charlotte." As the door slammed, Charlotte trembled, the fear swirling back. But Samuel stepped closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "You faced him." "I just don't know what he'll do next," she whispered, tears rising to her eyes. In the days that followed, tension lingered in the air. But Charlotte found strength in the connections she had forged within the community. Together, they began laying down roots, nurturing a shared existence that cradled hope and resilience. And as the leaves turned with brilliant autumn colors, so too did Charlotte blossom, nursing the dreams she had once thought dashed. She filled the garden with flowers of all kinds, a testament to the life she was building with Samuel by her side. She had faced storms and shadows, yet through each one she felt herself grow stronger. More than the banker's daughter, she was Charlotte, a woman with a voice, a heart, and a future forged in love. As winter arrived, the world transformed into a wonderland of white. Snow blanketed the cabins and fields, casting a tranquil silence over the landscape. Inside their warm refuge, laughter filled the air as they sat by the fire, sharing stories, dreams, and visions of what could be. "I want to keep growing," Charlotte said one evening, a new passion igniting within her. "Not just the farm, but our lives." Samuel's gaze softened, warmth blooming in his chest. In that moment, as they huddled together, Charlotte knew that she had faced her fears and come out stronger. She had fled the life mapped out for her, and she had emerged into a world flowering with possibilities. As the seasons changed and the world continued to turn, Charlotte understood one essential truth: love, resilience, and the courage to choose one's path ultimately shape the life we live. And with Samuel by her side, she was finally free, no longer the banker's daughter, but a woman who had summoned her own destiny and dared to embrace the beauty of it all. In the dead of night, Charlotte stood trembling in front of the massive iron gates of her father's estate, rain pounding against her like 1,000 tiny fists. With every droplet that splashed against her skin, she felt the weight of her decision settle over her. In a matter of minutes, she would slip away into the darkness, leaving behind the life that had kept her confined for far too long. She could still hear the distant laughter from the ballroom, a stark reminder of the world she was fleeing. Tonight, her father had announced her engagement to Jonathan Hastings, a man she barely knew. A marriage that was a mere transaction between two powerful families, a union to strengthen her father's empire. She had overheard her father discussing it with his associates, his voice dripping with ambition. "This is a significant step for our family," he had said, as though she were nothing more than a piece on a chessboard. The moment had sparked something deep inside her, an awakening. She was not merely a pawn in someone else's game. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte stepped forward, the rich earth squelching beneath her boots as she pushed through the gates, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, but the flicker of courage ignited by fear cast a glow over her decision. She was not simply running, she was reclaiming her life. As she plunged deeper into the woods, the towering trees enveloped her like ancient sentinels shielding a secret. She thought of Samuel, the farmhand who had worked on her father's estate. He had always treated her with kindness, his rugged exterior hiding a heart of gold. In the fleeting moments they shared, he had seen her for who she truly was, a woman full of dreams. He was her only hope in a world so desperate to suffocate her spirit. Her heart raced as she approached his cabin, flickering lights guiding her like a lighthouse in a storm. She knocked frantically on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. The door creaked open, revealing Samuel in his work clothes, eyes widening in surprise. He gasped. "I ran away," she gasped, rain-soaked and breathless. "I can't go back." With no time to question her, he stepped aside, allowing her into the warmth of his humble abode. The scent of wood smoke wrapped around her, a comforting embrace after the chill of the storm. It felt like a sanctuary, a world apart from the suffocating mansion she had just escaped. Samuel asked, concern etched into his brow. "I overheard my father. He arranged my engagement to Jonathan Hastings. It's all for his ambition, his power," she stammered, the fog of fear beginning to lift. Samuel's eyes darkened as he listened. She asked, her voice trembling, "Stay here. You can't go back." "I won't let you face him," Samuel replied, his demeanor shifting to one of fierce resolve. In that moment, something awakened inside Charlotte. For the first time, she felt like she could breathe without the weight of her father's expectations crushing her. Together, they began to navigate this newfound reality. Days turned into weeks, and life at the cabin blossomed. Charlotte learned the rhythms of farm life, digging her fingers into the soil and feeling the earth beneath her nails. Samuel taught her how to plant, to cultivate, and to nurture living things. He shared stories of the land and the life he had made for himself, each tale illuminating the beauty of simplicity. But even as laughter filled the cabin, an undercurrent of anxiety lurked just beneath the surface. Charlotte knew her father would soon realize she was missing. He didn't just play chess, he played with lives, using intimidation to get his way. That kind of power never relented. Unease hung in the air like a storm cloud threatening to burst. One evening, sitting around a flickering fire, Charlotte nervously spoke her fears aloud. "What if he comes looking for me?" "Your father may have power, but you have courage," Samuel said gently, "and you have me." But as comforting as his words were, fear gnawed at Charlotte's insides. What if her father's wrath extended beyond her? Could Samuel be in danger for helping her? That possibility haunted her, stirring doubts that took root. Just as she began to feel settled, the storm came crashing down. One late afternoon, the skies darkened and the air was thick with tension. Suddenly, a sharp knock broke the stillness of the woods. Charlotte's heart raced as she glanced toward Samuel. "Stay hidden," he whispered urgently, moving toward the door with the grace of a predator on the hunt. "No. I can't hide," she insisted, her voice rising in fear. "Trust me," Samuel replied, eyes fierce as he motioned for her to step back. As he opened the door, Charlotte's heart thundered in her chest. Standing there was her father, a man turned feral, raindrops cascading off his shoulders like stormy shadows. He growled, scanning the small cabin with contempt. "I haven't seen her," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the sudden surge of tension. "You're lying." Her father's anger boiled over, a tempest threatening to engulf them both. Charlotte's body shook with fear as she pressed herself against the wall. She could feel Samuel's presence next to her. He shouted, shielding her from her father's wrath. Her father scoffed, incredulity dripping from his words. "She's a child." "I'm not a child." Charlotte stepped out, feeling the fire ignite in her soul, her resolve hardening. Her father's expression twisted in disbelief. "You think you can run from me?" But she held her ground, the fear transforming into a fierce determination. The room crackled with tension, the air thick with unspoken fears and unyielding resolve. Her father stared at her, fury melting into confusion. The moment hung in the air before he turned and stormed out, a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. Charlotte collapsed back against the wall, trembling. "You stood up for yourself," Samuel said, his voice unwavering. She whispered, doubt creeping back in. "He will," Samuel assured her, moving closer. "But we'll be ready." Days turned into weeks and time passed in a blur amidst the seasons. Charlotte found herself weaving her life into Samuel's, the connection deepening with each shared moment. They worked side by side, their laughter filling the cabin with warmth and love. Together, they built not just a home, but something more, a sense of belonging, a life lining the edges of the horizon. But Charlotte's father did not stay dormant. Whispers echoed through the small town, and with every passing day, shadows loomed larger. They still remembered her, the banker's daughter who had gone missing, leaving chaos in her wake. Rumors swirled, and the threat of her father finding her loomed over them like dark storm clouds ready to burst. One evening, as twilight fell, their world was disrupted. A loud knock echoed through the cabin, and panic surged through Charlotte. Samuel swiftly moved toward the door, a protective presence, but Charlotte's instincts kicked in. "Stay calm," he urged, his expression serious. As he opened the door, a familiar yet unwelcome face stood before them. It was Jonathan Hastings, his demeanor smug and confident as if he had delivered a crushing blow to their lives. "Charlotte," he said, his voice smooth and malicious, "you can't hide from reality." Every instinct in Charlotte screamed to hide. "I'm not afraid of him," she replied, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. Jonathan took a step closer. "This life you're choosing will not give you the freedom you crave." Samuel positioned himself protectively next to Charlotte. "You don't understand what she's gained here." Jonathan scoffed, his voice dripping with scorn. "Freedom, you're tied to a filthy farm." Charlotte felt fire ignite within her. "You don't know me at all. I'm choosing my life," she asserted firmly. But Jonathan wasn't done. "You'll regret this choice," he warned, casting one last glance before storming off, leaving anger and uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. Charlotte whispered, her heartbeat racing. "Now we prepare," Samuel said calmly. As the days passed, the atmosphere thickened with tension. The world around them flourished, but uncertainty gnawed at the edges of their joy, a reminder that shadows could engulf their light. But they pushed forward, determined to carve out a life together. Then came another storm. One chilly morning, as dawn broke over the treetops, stirring the earth with whispers of hope, the familiar sound of hooves crunching on gravel filled the air. Suddenly, Charlotte's heart sank. She stepped outside to find her father's men dismounting nearby, grim faces betraying a singular mission. Without thinking, Charlotte dashed back into the cabin, panic rising through her. "It's them. Stay calm." "Face them together," Samuel reassured her, his expression a steady anchor against the tide. Her heart raced as they listened to the men draw closer, their voices harsh and urgent. "We know she's here," one commanded. With the sounds of movement surrounding them, Charlotte's thoughts raced. Her father would stop at nothing to control her life again. She whispered, her voice trembling. "Hide," Samuel instructed quietly. As Charlotte slipped into the small closet of the cabin, fear coursed through her veins. She held her breath, every sound amplified as footsteps echoed within. "Search everywhere," one of the men barked, anger rippling through his tone. "Keep looking," came another voice, authoritative and commanding, ringing out with certainty. In the cramped space, Charlotte felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, panic bubbling up as she thought of Samuel alone. What if they found him? What if they took him away? After what felt like an eternity, the door swung wide and in walked her father, flanked by two men. He commanded, eyes scanning for any sign of life. Straining to hear, Charlotte pressed her back against the cold wooden wall, battling the urge to burst forth to confront him. "Search thoroughly," he shouted, his frustration palpable. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm her, she heard Samuel speak up. "You're wrong. She has run to create her own life." For a beat, time itself seemed to stop. Those words hung thick in the air, and everything shifted as Charlotte's heart surged with pride. Samuel was standing up for her. Her father roared, anger spilling over as he motioned for them to search every corner of the cabin. But Charlotte felt something crack within her, a web of fear breaking under the pressure of her newfound resolve. Stepping out of the closet, she faced her father. "You won't take me." The men surrounding her father froze, eyes wide with surprise, but Charlotte's gaze remained steady. "You do not control my life anymore." Her father's expression twisted, caught between fury and disbelief. "You think you can defy me?" he shouted, struggling with the realization that he could no longer hold her captive. But she couldn't retreat. She had chosen this life. And in that fierce exchange, something shifted. The presence of her father's power began to wane, leaving room for a strength she had come to trust. Behind her, Samuel stood tall, unwavering, an unyielding force at her side. "Let her be." The air hung heavy with all that had been unsaid, the tension threatening to snap. Her father let out a frustrated growl, turning away as he stormed out of the cabin, leaving behind shadows of what had been. In the silence that followed, Charlotte felt relieved but also vulnerable. She whispered, sensing the lingering storm. "If he does, we'll be ready," Samuel promised, stepping closer. As time passed, Charlotte found herself immersing in the depths of community. The world outside began to take root, and they cultivated a bond that sowed not just seeds, but trust, laughter, and resilience into their lives. Each sunset illuminated a reality she had dared to embrace. They continued to share dreams beneath the night sky, laying plans for a market that would allow them not just to survive, but to thrive, a source of joy and nourishment for their community. With every passing day, Charlotte felt fulfilled, finding purpose in the life she had chosen. But like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon, her father's threat still hovered nearby. One crisp morning, as the sun stretched its fingers across the field, Charlotte and Samuel worked side by side, planting seeds, both in the ground and into the future. The world felt alive, buzzing with potential. But just as hope bloomed, the sound of hooves grew louder, dread creeping back into her heart. And there he was again, her father, riding ahead with that menacing glare, flanked by Jonathan and a posse of men from the village. The weight of despair settled over her like a shroud. Before Charlotte could think, Samuel stepped forward, shielding her. He asked, voice steady but wary. Charlotte's father sneered. "I've come to retrieve my daughter. Now step aside, Farmhand." "I won't let you take her," Samuel replied, firmness radiating from him. "She has a life here." Her father shouted, turning his gaze back to Charlotte. "You think you can thrive out here?" But Charlotte felt her strength rising, fueled by determination and the bond she had forged with Samuel. "I am not going with you. I'm building my own life," she declared, voice unwavering. As the tension escalated, the men exchanged anxious glances, unsure of what to do. But Charlotte stared resolutely at her father, feeling the weight of her own choices crystallizing around her. "I am not afraid of you," she cried out, and the words echoed through the trees like a battle cry. For a moment, silence enveloped them, the world seemingly holding its breath. Then, with a furious roar, her father turned, fury radiating from him as he mounted his horse. "You will regret this, Charlotte." But as he rode off into the distance, leaving nothing but dust behind, a wave of liberation washed over her. With a mix of relief and exhilaration, Charlotte turned back to Samuel, who watched her with unyielding pride. "You did it," he said softly. Charlotte felt light, emotions swirling in her chest. "I'm finally free," she whispered, knowing that she had fought for her happiness. In the weeks that followed, they worked harder than ever, pouring their hearts into the land and the life they were building side by side. The market flourished, bursting into a tapestry of vitality as people arrived, drawn by the warmth they shared. With every passing season, the call of the past faded, replaced by the beautiful rhythm of hope and community. Charlotte had transformed from the banker's daughter into a woman who embraced her choices, not just for herself but for everyone around her. As summer rolled into fall, she found herself standing in the fields, sunlight dancing like liquid gold across the horizon. Samuel joined her, his presence a comforting balm. He asked, "We build an even brighter future," she replied, looking into his eyes. And in that moment, surrounded by the promise of tomorrow, the echoes of her past faded utterly. Charlotte understood at last that courage was not merely the absence of fear, but the choice to embrace life fully. They stood together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever lay ahead, the horizon wide open with possibilities, their hearts beating as one. Charlotte had fled in the night, but in her flight she had soared to new heights, discovering not just her destiny but the man who made it all worthwhile. The heavy rain poured down in sheets as Charlotte darted through the darkened streets of Willow Creek, her heart racing like a wild stallion. The distant sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed from her father's grand mansion, but she knew the laughter was not for her. Tonight was the night she would flee her gilded cage, a cage crafted by her father's ambitions and expectations. She couldn't let it happen, not the engagement to Jonathan Hastings, not the life that awaited her as the banker's obedient daughter. "I won't be a pawn in this game anymore," she whispered, determination coursing through her veins. As she reached the edge of the sprawling estate, the towering trees of the nearby woods loomed ahead like guardians of the unknown. Summer's humidity clung to her skin, but the cold grip of fear sank deeper. But with each step into the darkness, the weight of her decision lifted. She thought of Samuel, the farmhand who had once looked at her like she was more than just a daughter of wealth. His laughter and kindness had sparked something within her, a flicker of hope in a world where her dreams were stifled. "He'll understand," she promised herself, the thought of him steadying her resolve. As she stepped deeper into the woods, the pitter-patter of raindrops celebrated her escape, filling her with adrenaline. "I'm free," she whispered, the words tasting bitter and sweet at once. She pushed her way through thick foliage, branches clinging to her like hands urging her to turn back. But she couldn't go back, she had to keep moving forward. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spotted the small cabin nestled among the trees. Its warm glow flickered through the rain-drenched windows, offering a beacon of safety amidst her chaos. She knocked swiftly, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. The door swung open and there stood Samuel, his eyes wide with surprise, the astonished look quickly dissolving into concern. "Charlotte." "I ran away," she gasped, shivering, raindrops cascading down her face. "I can't go back." For a heartbeat, Samuel stood frozen, taking in her bedraggled appearance. The concern faded, replaced by a fierce determination. "You're safe here." The cabin was warm, illuminated by the soft glow of a fire crackling in the hearth. The air was rich with the smell of something hearty simmering on the stove, comfort in every sense of the word. Yet somehow she still felt unmoored, as if the ground beneath her had started to shift. Samuel asked, his voice steady, his gaze intense. "I overheard my father. He made arrangements for my engagement to Jonathan Hastings without even asking me. It's all for business, for power," she confessed, feeling tangled by her own emotions as she cast her gaze down. Samuel's expression darkened, a flash of sympathy crossing his face. "You deserve better, Charlotte," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stay here. You'll be safe with me." "Let's figure this out together," he urged, his eyes shining with sincerity. A spark of hope flickered within her, igniting a warmth that spread through her chest. "But your life is here. You have responsibilities." "You're not imposing. You're my friend," Samuel replied, his tone firm. "This is about your life." As the storm raged outside, Charlotte felt her spirit begin to mend, as though each raindrop was washing away the chains that had bound her for so long. Together, they formed a makeshift routine, planting seeds in the garden and sharing meals by the fire as they navigated the uncharted waters of this new existence. Days turned into weeks, and with every sunrise, Charlotte felt herself bloom, rediscovering a part of her she thought had been lost forever. Samuel was patient, teaching her about the land and the beauty of hard work. She learned to appreciate the feel of the earth beneath her fingernails, the satisfaction of watching something grow under her care. But as happiness started to settle in, so too did tension. The shadows of the past lingered at the edges of her newfound freedom. What would her father do when he discovered she was gone? The thought turned the warmth of their cabin into something chilling. One particularly tempestuous night, as thunder boomed overhead and rain lashed against the windows, fear clawed its way back into her heart. She asked Samuel, her voice trembling as they sat huddled near the fire. "He probably will, but you can't live your life in fear," he answered gently, his emerald eyes steady. "Remember why you left." But those words only partially calmed her. Would happiness be worth the risks? Just as doubt began to creep in, a loud knock resonated through the cabin, breaking the fragile peace. "Charlotte," a familiar voice roared, chilling her to the bone. It was her father come to reclaim his lost daughter. Panic surged through her, and Samuel moved instinctively. "Stay hidden," he whispered, pushing her toward a small cupboard in the corner. She challenged, heart racing. "Just trust me," Samuel implored, urgency piercing his voice. "Stay quiet." Her heart was in overdrive as she squeezed into the cupboard, every breath a battle against fear. Through the thin wood, she could hear her father's booming voice demanding entry as the door swung open. "Samuel." He barked, filled with an anger that echoed through the cabin. "I haven't seen her," Samuel replied coolly, despite the tension crackling in the air. "You're lying." Her father slammed his fist against a wall, the sound reverberating through the tiny space. Charlotte held her breath, waiting for the moment to come crashing down. No way could she let him take her back. Her father ordered, frustration dripping from his words. Every heartbeat felt like thunder in her ears, and just when she thought her father would storm deeper into the cabin, Samuel stepped forward. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, voice firm. "Charlotte is free to choose her own life." The silence that followed felt heavy, a thick fog wrapping around them. Charlotte could feel her father's anger swirling around, but there was something else, an underlying vulnerability, perhaps even fear. "I will make sure you pay for this," her father finally hissed, the fire raging not just in the hearth but within his chest. Then, just as quickly as he had come, he stormed out of the cabin, leaving a tornado of emotion swirling behind him. Charlotte burst from her hiding spot, breathless. "What happens now?" "But not today," Samuel reassured her, his hand finding hers. "You faced him." In the days that followed, Charlotte found herself wrapped in a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. She kept replaying the confrontation in her mind, the adrenaline that had surged through her when she faced her father. There was power in standing firm, in refusing to back down. As winter approached, something began to change within her. Where fear had once dominated her thoughts, newfound strength began to take root. Every day, she and Samuel planned their future, discussing dreams of a market, a way to share their love for the land and their lives with the community. The beauty of simplicity felt rich, tangible, something worth fighting for. But the storm clouds on the horizon never entirely dissipated. Rumors began to swirl again, whispers about the banker's daughter who had vanished into thin air. The townsfolk glanced furtively in their direction, eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. One gray afternoon, as the weight of uncertainty hung heavy, the door suddenly swung open, revealing more than just a familiar face. It was Jonathan Hastings, his posture radiating confidence mixed with disdain. "Charlotte," he called, voice laced with resentment, "you can't continue this charade." Fear gripped Charlotte's heart, a vice tightening around her. "I'm not going back," she declared, stepping forward with Samuel at her side. Jonathan scoffed, his gaze sliding contemptuously over the small, humble cabin. "This is nothing but a fantasy." But Charlotte stood firm, remembering her father's shackles dissolving like mist. "You don't understand me at all." He stepped closer, unyielding in his facade. "Your father won't stop until he finds you." "Imagine what he's already done," Samuel said, taking a protective stance at her side. "You have no power here, Jonathan." "I will come for her," Jonathan spat, voice dark and threatening. With that declaration, he turned and stormed out, leaving the air thick with tension and uncertainty. Charlotte whispered, dread washing over her. "We prepare," Samuel said, his eyes burning with determination. But doubt crept in like a cold wind. Would her father come with even more power behind him? Would he retaliate with anger for her defiance? As the shadows of winter settled in, Charlotte felt herself teetering on the edge of fear. In the following weeks, they clung to one another, cultivating not just the garden but the seeds of their dreams. They planned and prepared, seeking warmth in each other's laughter and a sense of community, despite the darkness that threatened to consume them. But one fateful evening, the storm returned with a vengeance. The winds howled against the cabin walls, and an unease settled deep within Charlotte's heart. The fire crackled violently as they sat huddled together. Her heart sank as she heard the unmistakable sound of hooves approaching again. "Samuel," she breathed, dread clawing at her insides. "Stay close," he instructed, moving toward the door, a fierce protector once more. As Charlotte gripped the edge of the table, her breath hitched in her throat. Just as he swung the door open, she caught sight of her father, flanked this time by Jonathan and others men who looked as if they were ready to do battle. "Let her go," her father boomed, voice trembling with fury and authority. Charlotte shouted, stepping up beside Samuel, heart racing. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside the cabin. Emotions ran high, resentment crackling like lightning overhead. Samuel stood unwavering beside her, grounding her as they faced the onslaught together. He declared, voice steady against the rising tide. But her father stepped forward, voice brimming with desperation. "You will regret this choice, both of you." Charlotte inhaled deeply, summoning every ounce of courage she had. "You don't understand what it means to be free." The tension reached a boiling point, words slicing through the air like daggers. But just as her father opened his mouth to retaliate, Charlotte saw something shift in his expression, a brief flicker of doubt perhaps. In that charged moment, she realized that every fear, every doubt, every effort to control her life had faltered against her unwavering resolve. She stood firm, heart beating wild and free. As her father turned to leave, rage burning like the setting sun, Charlotte felt the surge of power course through her, the uncertainty of her future terrifying yet thrilling. She shouted after him, the words echoing into the night. But once again, the storm had grown. As her father vanished into the shadows, Jonathan took a step toward Charlotte, smirking as he flicked the brim of his hat. "You'll pay for this, Charlotte, you'll see," he murmured, a threat lingering in the air. But Charlotte held her ground, heart steady. "We'll face whatever comes together," she whispered to Samuel, eyes burning with fierce determination. The winds howled, shaking the very foundations of the cabin as she wrapped her fingers around the warmth of his hand. Together, they stood resolute against the storm, ready to face the unknown. This was just the beginning. The true battle had yet to unfold. And as dawn broke with unexpected brilliance, Charlotte realized that she was not just running away from chains. She was stepping boldly into a life of her choosing. But the question lingered like a shadow. Would it be enough to withstand the oncoming storm?